Okay, hey, it is a few minutes before 8 a.m. I'm assuming I am live and everybody can see me. Let me walk around and get in front of the camera here. Could someone do me a favor? And I know we got first from Puerto Rico up there. Could someone just text in the message column that you can hear me and you can see me so I can have the confidence to go forward because I am here by myself. I'll go check the message in 1 second. So what this is a 1965 Oldsmobile 442 convertible. It's an iconic, classic Detroit iron muscle car. It has a repaint. Okay, so I did a little test already yesterday. It is base coat clear coat, and I just want to point that out because a lot of times when I work on these classic cars, they've been restored 10, 20, maybe 30 years ago, still look pretty good, but they actually were repainted with old single stage enamel. But this does have a base coat clear coat finish on it. And so not that, people say, what's the difference in buffing out single stage and base coat clear coat? There's really no difference. The key thing is always use great abrasive technology. If you use junk for abrasives, they might remove the defects, but they're going to leave their own defects. And you end up kind of taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and you're removing paint needlessly. And think about this. If you use, what I just call junk abrasive technology, and you mess up the paint job, so now you have to repolish it. You'll have to change to good abrasive technology if you're smart. And that means everything you just did took off paint needlessly. So, always try to use the best abrasive technology you can obtain, and always start by doing a test spot. And when it comes to I'm going to show some sanding. That's something I didn't announce. The paint on this is just so bad that I figured it'd be faster and actually more effective to go ahead and just do some light sanding with 2500 grit dry and then do the compounding and buffing. Everything a lot faster, results will look a lot better. But even if you're going to do sanding, you should always start out by doing a test spot. One time in my life, I came across a guy that repainted a Ferrari, and he sanded the entire car down. Then he went to try to pull sanding marks out, could not get them out, had to repaint the car because the paint was so hard. Now, this was before the age of Trizac sanding discs, before Eagle sanding discs that I know of, because this was back in the 80s. So back then we didn't have the high grits that we had back then, but I personally went over there and tried to resand using 2500 and 3000 by hand using the Nikon electronics grade, and then compounding and trying to get the sanding marks out. Could not get them out. So the lesson I learned there is before you sand down an entire car, start by doing a test spot, just like you would do if you were doing paint correction. Okay, I'm going to walk back here and see if I got a comment, and then I'm going to get started showing you how to take windshield wiper arms off of classic cars like this. Okay, no one's given me a comment yet, so I just have to assume that you guys can hear and see me. So let me try something here. Can you see and hear me, Jim? Gosh, I hate to do all this and not have good audio and video. I think I did everything right. I'm kind of the video newbie. That's usually Yancey's gig. Okay, let me try. Mr. Michael Pena is online. Michael Pena. Hey, Michael, can you see and hear me? I just need someone to let me know. Okay, so one of the things I want to do is, this is called a fresh air grill. A lot of classic cars have this. It's just there's a still grill here over a vent that would take fresh air in for air conditioning or non-air conditioned car, just to bring fresh air into the car. And a lot of times if you're going to be sanding and buffing and doing a lot of work on the hood, it's just natural to throw splatter down underneath this grill. And the thing is there's really no easy way for most of us to remove this and clean that out. So what you want to do is tape it off and cover it up. But to start with, these have these nice classic wiper arms. And this is a little tool I got off Amazon. It's a Dorman wiper arm removal wrench. And you just want to take and stick it down there and grab the bottom. Then you pull the wiper arm up to it. Then carefully just wiggle it off. And that's how you take these things off. And then what I like to do is I just like to say, okay, someone texted me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now I got confidence to go. So just real quick, one of the things I like to do, and I know this can seem a little OCD, but that's what detailing really is OCD, is I'm just going to take a piece of tape, and I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to mark this as the driver's side. Now, a lot of times these are universal. You could put them on either side, but sometimes they're not. And instead of guessing at the end of the day when I'm tired, I just take one of them, the driver's side, and just mark it off. So I'm just going to put driver like that and set this thing aside. I'm not going to mark the other one because there's only two. It's pretty, if I screw that up, there's something really wrong. Okay, so let me go over and get the other one off. Okay, so the other comment I wanted to make is I always feel very fortunate when people with cars like this trust me with them. Get that on there. Come on there. There we go. Okay, a little wrench. Just what it is, it just kind of clips on like that. You pull it like that, and it'll lift up. And what it does is it's releasing a spring-loaded clip on there that kind of locks onto the wiper arm rotor or gear there. Okay, so now that we're done with that. Okay, we're done with this. Okay. So now I've removed that, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clay this, and that'll give me a chance to clean all this area, and then I'll tape it off. Now, if I do the baggie test, and I happen to have a baggie here, and I did a waterless wash on this car yesterday using the Dr. Beasley's prep wash, but I still want to do a baggie test. And just like you would expect, I mean, this is an older car. It's completely contaminated. So I'm going to go ahead and clay this thing real quick. And throughout this video, I'm going to show the entire process. To be completely honest, for projects like this, I don't really care if you guys are watching or if you click away or go eat breakfast. This is all going to be recorded onto YouTube, and we can use this for other things later. The important thing is I was asked to detail this car by a good friend. And I figured, well, if I'm going to do it, I might as well just do it on camera live, because there might be someone out there that has never done any of the things I'm going to be showing today, and they would be interested in learning how to do them. Okay, and I think for this video, I have both sides set up. I got two different workstations here, so I could actually do both sides if I wanted to. But I'm kind of thinking I might just do this one side for brevity, you know, because this can be like watching paint dry or grass grow or water boil, meaning this type of work does take a while. Okay, I got plenty of people letting me know we're golden. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so this side is clean. I'm going to redo the bagging test. That was a clay towel I was using, by the way. And it feels pretty good. I always feel a little bit of bumps on the paint after claying. It seems like it's almost impossible to remove everything. So the most you can hope for is most of it. And sometimes those little bumps that you feel, they actually might not be contaminants. They might actually just be imperfections in the paint that no amount of claying is going to take off anyway. Okay, so if I get down here low, maybe you can hear all the crud. So this is a detailing clay towel. I like detailing clay. Actually, my experience is if you got some really bad overspray paint, an aggressive clay bar always works better than a clay towel, a clay mitt, or a clay disc. I'm not sure why, but I'm going to guess it's because of the content and quality and quantity of pulverized abrasives in the clay itself. So, but I've just noticed that clay seems to be more aggressive. But towels are convenient because, as you all know, if you drop it, you can pick it up, wipe it off, wash it off, and continue using it. Okay, so there we go. So that side is clayed, that side is clayed. Now, the next thing I want to do, sorry all this walking back and forth, but it is what it is. Okay, so this is some very low tack tape. It's frog tape. And whenever you're taping stuff off, pull the tape out, then you can steer it with your other hand. Not that there needs to be a lot of steering for something that's straight. But sometimes if you're taping things off that have corners, of course you have to make the tape go around the corner. Okay, so I'm just gonna hit like that. And for stuff like this, I usually don't like to press down too hard on the tape. And there's a reason why. And you body shop guys, anybody that's ever painted a car, you'll understand this. But a lot of times when someone's doing their prep work to paint a car, it's really easy to sand and prep a big flat panel. It gets more complicated when you got all these little ribs or these little fins or ribs there. It's just harder to do really great prep work for some shops, not all shops. And what that means is later on, you don't got good paint adhesion. It could be the primer, could be the base coat, could be the clear coat. Something's not adhesing very well. And then when someone like me comes along and tapes this off, and then we pull the tape off, we pull the paint off. Been there, done that a couple times in my life. So I like to be really careful. A couple other ways you could actually tackle this if you wanted to be really safe was you could open up the hood, pull some plastic down, pull the plastic back up, tape it up here, and no tape would ever be on this painted section. So you could avoid pulling the tape off just by simply not using tape. And another technique I share is I will take a microfiber towel and lay it here, but not actually, I won't do that, because if I did that as I'm buffing, a lightweight towel would just catch the wind from the spinning pad and just fly off. So I'll get it wet with water, wring out most of the water, and then, just kind of fold this in a way that it'll cover up the fresh air grill on a classic car. So something like this, get it wet with water, and then lay it here. And because now it's heavy with water, it won't tend to fly off because of the air current caused by your spinning pad. So that's 3 different ways you can tackle covering up a fresh air grill. Okay, now when I first looked at this vehicle, it just has a lot of swirls and scratches. The back trunk lid, there's actually pigtails. There's DA sanding marks back there. So it looks to me like somebody tried to sand it, maybe gave up, because they certainly didn't get all their sanding marks out. But as I look at this thing, it's just so bad that instead of grabbing a wool pad and a compound and a rotary polisher and just hammering on it, which I'm completely capable of doing, I just thought it would be faster to go ahead and just lightly sand this. And before I start, a lot of people ask me if I ever use a paint thickness gauge. So this is a Defelsco. It's not D-E-L, Del, it's Def, D-E-F, Defelsco. And this is their paint thickness gauge. This is what's called a 3% gauge. It's made in America. It's very accurate. Most gauges are 5% or larger. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, that's not a very big difference between 3% and 5%. Well, when you're measuring something super thin, it's a huge difference. So let me just go ahead and take some measurements here. And I know you can't see them. I'll call them out. 13.8, 9.9, 12.7, 13.3, 14.6, 14.0, 13.0, 12.3, 33.9, let me check, 37.6. So when you jump 21.0, when you start to jump around and have thicker paint there, that could just be a sign there's some Bondo down there. I think this thing will read up to about 35 mils, and then once it goes past that, it just shows up as blank, and that's an indicator you got some Bondo. I could be wrong on those numbers, but from memory, that's what it is. Of course, I wrote an article on how to use this probably 10 years ago. Very good thickness gauge. Okay, so now that I got this thing sanded, I just want to point out one thing. I see a lot of people that are new to detailing, when they get to work on a car like this, one of the things they do is they'll take and tape off this trim before buffing it. No reason to do that. In fact, you want to run the buffer into it because you'll shine it up. A lot of this trim is either nickel, chrome, aluminum, or stainless steel, and all of those metals will tarnish, and it's pretty easy to tell because if you were to take a white cloth and any polish, a paint polish, and rub on there and turn it over, you'll pull blackness up. So that's the tarnish or the oxidation taking place. Now, so I wouldn't tape that off as I'm just buffing, but if I'm sanding, I don't want to run my sanding disc into this and scar it. So if you're in this position, you may want to tape that off if you're sanding. Now, one of the things I'm going to do right now is I'm going to edge a panel. And I don't know if I came up with this technique, but I've sure been using it and teaching it for a long time. And the idea behind it is this. When you have access to, let's just call this a micro sander. This is a Flex Pixie with a 3-inch disc. I've got the 6-inch drive unit on there, 6mm drive unit. So when you turn it on, it has a very tight orbit pattern, and that allows you to sand really close to an object, an edge, or a raised body line without actually hitting it. Too big of an orbit stroke, you can't stand very close to it, so now you got a lot of orange peel right up to it. And too small of a one usually are too anemic, they can't maintain sanding disc rotation. So this 6mm is like a perfect sweet spot in between too large and too little. But something I always do in practice is called edge a panel. And real quickly, I am using the Eagle abrasives. This is the 2500 Bufflex, both in a 6-inch and 3-inch. I also have the Eagle abrasives interface pad here. And the thing I would just point out, because a lot of people think all interface or hook and loop, Velcro is the same. This has microscopic hooks. And what that does is the sanding disc itself is as thin as a piece of paper. So it keeps all that sanding action just on the top. It isn't going to go in and out of the orange peel or any surface texture, which is what you want. You want to keep the sanding action on top. But this is called edging a panel. And place that on there so no portion of the interface pad is going to touch the paint. And then I also teach something called the rule of thumb. And I know sometimes there's some controversy over this because most detailers and guys that work in body shops are very OCD. But the rule of thumb is because wherever I go, this is really a bad joke, I take my thumb. So I can put my thumb next to an edge, and I want to sand about a thumbnail distance, which for me is probably about 3/4 of an inch away from that edge. So here's an edge, and here's that metal trim. So if I just put my thumb there and imagine a space next to it about a 3/4 of an inch away, that's as close as I'm going to sand. And the reason why is because it's easy to sand paint. That's putting scratches in. I can sand right up to every one of these edges, raised body lines, and trim. The problem is when you come back and you want to pull your sanding marks out with a wool pad on a rotary, now you're going to be buffing on all the edges that you just sanded next to, and all the raised body lines and all the trim. And it not only is it incredibly more time consuming, it's very risky. And at some point, you're probably going to burn through the edge or burn through a high point. And so instead, what I do is I practice is just staying about a thumbnail distance away from any edge, raised body line, or trim. And then here's the controversy. Well, Mike, if you sand all this, but you don't quite sand right next to the trim there, won't there be orange peel there? And the answer, of course, is yes. Okay. But if you go to a car show and you start looking at all the high-end bills that have been sanded and buffed, a lot of times if you look in the middle panels, there's no orange peel. As soon as you start getting up close to an edge, a raised body line, or trim, you see a little orange peel kicking back in, because not only do I not have enough time to sand next to the edge and then come back and pull all my sanding marks out next to the edges, nobody else does too. Maybe Jason Kilmer, the Sandman, he is the king of sanding in our industry, and he can probably sand next to the edge and come back and pull his sanding marks out. But I'll guarantee you, he has a lot of time into those cars, and I'm going to bust this thing out in a day. So there's just keep it real. And if you're doing this for money, a lot of times for cars like this, if I was being asked to sand and buff this, I'd be in the $2,500 to $3,000 range. And part of that money has to cover your expensive sanding gear. But as soon as you start sanding next to the edges, now you got to buff next to the edges. You got to buff carefully, which means you got to pay attention, go slow, and be careful. You're going to add a lot of hours to that process, and that means instead of making $100 an hour, you'll be making $1 an hour. So you don't want to do that. Okay, so real quick, and people are blowing up my phone here. This is called edging a panel, and one of the things I really like about the Flex Pixie is because it's small and lightweight, it's very easy to control. So that means you can get very close to an edge, or like I'm doing right there, a piece of trim, without hitting it. Now, as you're sanding, you're going to get paint buildup. You can see this paint is white because anytime you abrade clear coat, it's opaque. And you can just take a soft nylon brush and brush that off. That way, you can actually just turn it on. I want to hold this away from the car. You can blip the throttle, just kind of run that over it. My preferred method, though, is just take a clean microfiber towel and then just either wipe it off or turn it on and wipe it off. And, of course, also wipe the dust off up here. Otherwise, as soon as you bring this back down, you're just going to put all that loose dust right back on the face of your sanding disc. Okay, so I'm on the 3 setting, and usually what I want to do is I just want to see a little bit of sanding disc rotation. If you're rotating too much, that would be called grinding paint. I don't want to grind the paint. I just want to lightly flatten it out a little bit. And this is working really good. So this is called edging a panel. And the reason I like to edge a panel, and I was alluding to this earlier, is because with this small tool, I can get in here really close without hitting the edge or raised body line. So I have really good control. So I do this, the hard part, the delicate part, the surgical part, and then I come back with the big 6-inch, and all I got to do is knock out the fast, easy to do because I already hit the edges there. So that's kind of the logic behind this. Okay. And if you're watching me sanding, you notice I'm going back and forth. So the reason I'm doing that is I'm looking to see, once I've sanded that area, if the paint is flattened down enough to meet my expectations, and then I move forward. So that's kind of about the only way you can do it. Now, I'm just going to do the easy to sand and buff part on this hood. But when this video goes off, I'll come down and do the waterfall, the front clip of this hood. So everything will get done and have a uniform look. And even though this is 2,500, it actually sands pretty fast. So. And some of you seasoned body shop guys that are watching or will see this in the future, I know you're saying, well, Mike, 2,500 is really not aggressive enough. So I would agree, but let me put this in context. This isn't my car. I was not able to talk to the painter. I can do a paint thickness gauge test and readings, but paint thickness gauge measures total film build, not just the clear coat layer. So I don't want to buy this guy a paint job because, you know, I'd rather take that money and buy me a paint job. So I tend to want to be more careful than get too aggressive. My old manager at McGuire's, Mike Pennington, I love this saying he always used: this is your chance to be the hero or the zero. I don't want to be a zero. Okay, so let me touch up a little bit more right here. And as you're sanding something like this, you can really start to see the deeper defects show up, because what happens is the top parts sand flat and become dull, and anything deeper is still shiny down below. The big picture results, however, are simply going to be that when I'm done with this, it's going to look amazing. So, okay, so now that I've edged my panel, now I'm going to take my DA sander. This, by the way, a lot of people ask me what this is. This is a Flex FX3411. It's a wood sander. It's a cordless wood sander. I cut the vacuum attachment off here. You can actually unbolt the backing plate and pull this component off if you want to. I didn't have the right screwdriver to pull off, so I just took a hacksaw and cut it off. This comes with a 5-inch backing plate, and I'm using 6-inch discs. So I have a 6-inch interface pad on here. Now, again, some of you seasoned experts will say, well, Mike, if your interface pad is larger than the backing plate, there won't be equal pressure all the way out to the edge. Correct, there won't be. And unless you've never taught detailing classes, that's actually a good thing. If you're handing this over to some stranger, you know, in your class to buff out some other dude's street rod, you don't want them sanding with lots of pressure right at the edge. You want to have that be able to flex up a little bit, because they're new. They can make mistakes. They'll sand too far. So I like having just a little bit of no pressure on the edges just to keep everybody safe, you know. And when I teach these sanding classes here at Dr. Beasley's OR, the operating room here in sunny Stuart, Florida, I bring in a lot of cool cars like this for people to learn on. And the first thing I teach people about sanding down cars is in this class is I'm not here to make you an expert in one day, okay, or 2 days or 3 days, however long the class is. I'm here to give you a foundation you can build on, okay? So learning the techniques, learning how to center up your interface pad, learning how to place your sanding disc so it centers, so no part of the hook on the hook and loop is going to touch the paint. By the way, this has the same interface. This is the Eagle Abrasives, microscopic hooks, super thin sanding disc, so it's going to keep all that sanding action on top. Now, this has 3 speed settings and a turbo, and so usually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this down. I'm on the 1, And as I move it, look how fast it's sanding. I want to see if I got just a little bit of rotation, okay? Now, I know some people, when they're sanding, they want to see a lot of rotation, but in my book, if you got a lot of rotation going on, that's pretty fast sanding action. I don't call that sanding, I call that grinding. So I don't want to be grinding on some of the guy's street rod. I just want to be lightly sanding it. So I'm going to turn this on. I don't really have great rotation, so I'm going to bump it up one. There you go. Now I got some pretty good rotation. And this is what I meant by edging a panel. Now I don't got to try to get really close to any of the trim, the raised body lines, or the edges. I already did that with the micro sander where I had a lot of easy, super easy to control it. Okay, lots of paint. Just going to pull that off, turn this off, and now remove the dust here. Again, so you don't want to bring that, you don't want to clean the sanding disc off and then come back and pick up all that dust and just put it right on your sanding disc. So, okay, I'm going to actually bump up to the 3 here. Okay, there's 2 passes, and I think you can see, hopefully on camera, that 2 passes has knocked down this paint a little bit, not quite as much as I want to go, so I'm going to keep going. And I always have people ask me, hey Mike, why do you dry sand instead of wet sand? And so the one thing I want to point out is it's really user preference. Like if you like the wet sand, do it. I started wet sanding with the Meguiar system back in 1987. Okay, so I can't do math in my head, but that's a long time ago. And we're not talking about sanding. We're talking about, I was calling on body shops and showing other guys how to sand. So I've been using the Meguiar's, what's called the Nikken sanding disc for a long time. And it's a great system. And any wet sanding reputable brand like 3M, even the Eagle abrasives have a wet system. If that's your preference, then by all means, that's what you want to do. The reason I like dry sanding is because it's neater and it's faster. Okay, so if you've never wet sanded before, after sanding, you need to wipe off that moisture, that slurry, and then engage and inspect and engage. Have I removed the orange peel, the surface texture, the DIP, the fish eyes enough, or do I need to keep sanding? But there's a lag time there because you're waiting for that water to evaporate. Of course, you could grab a towel and wipe it off. But with dry sanding, I mean, just as fast as you saw me do that, you sand and then wipe, you look and inspect, and you go, yeah, that looks good. I'm moving on to the next panel. Or no, I need to come back and do a little bit more sanding. In this case, I'm going to hit this area. Okay, that looks good. That's as far as I'm going to go. And it looks ugly because it looks dull, but it looks good because I've leveled that paint. My longtime friends, Kevin Brown and Larry Casella, I think they use a term called the mow down. When you're starting out on a neglected finish and you make that initial pass with your compound or polish and whatever tool, you're just kind of mowing down and removing a lot of the rough stuff that's on the surface. Well, this sanding process does the mow down really good. This thing it is flat like a chalkboard. Okay, so there, that's sanded. And just real quickly, some people would ask me, well, Mike, how come you're using a cordless sander instead of like a pneumatic sander? Like most body shops use a pneumatic sander. Well, a couple of things about that, and I've taught classes with pneumatic sanders for years. They're great. The thing about that is you always got to remember, at some place you got to plug in your compressed air line, which is stiff. It's under pressure. And now when you're trying to hold this thing flat, if the cord is dragging off to the side, which it shouldn't be, because that means it's scratching the sides of the fenders, but it's going to want to tip this way. If you put it over your shoulder, like I would do, now you got this compressed air line coming down here, making a curve. It's going to want to tip it up this way. So the whole time you're standing with a pneumatic, you have to try to wrestle with it to keep this thing flat, because you don't want to go up on edge. You'll gouge the paint. You also have ineffective sanding disc rotation. So nothing wrong with pneumatic, but you always have to fight that. Now, you can use a lot of polishers like the Porter cable, the Braun 6-inch DA, the Grasso Garage G9, the old GG6. Those all have 8mm orbit stroke lengths, which is pretty aggressive for sanding paint, but you can get away with it. And now you're just using a limp electric cord. So different than a compressed air line, just a limp electric cord. So it isn't going to be fighting your sander all the time. But cordless is that's really nice. So hats off to Flex for coming up with such a nice little lightweight tool. Okay, so got this completely wiped down and clean. Now the next step, let me just check this, because I want to make sure if someone's let me know my audio dropped off or something. Has someone asked me on? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mike. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to pull my sanding marks out. Now, this is another controversial topic. I don't know why, because I learned years and years and years ago to never argue with people. Let everybody find their own way to shiny. But for me, I'll just give you my take. Could I take these 2500 grit out with a Porter cable? Admittedly, one of the weakest DA polishers in the world. And yes, I could. Any polisher that can remove swirls and scratches, normal swirls and scratches, can pull out sanding marks. The key difference is speed and effectiveness. With the wool pad spinning on a rotary, you got a lot of power there, which means you're going to be able to go fast and you're going to be effective, because you have two things working for you. You have the fibers, okay? Those are a form of abrasive, and you have your abrasive technology, in this case, the Dr. Beasley's NSP 150. So you have two things working for you, plus a very powerful tool that's gear driven, so there's not going to be any stalling. So I could pull this out of the DA sanding marks, but let's put this in context. I'm not shooting this video. I'm out here in the garage by myself. I got the whole thing to do. I want to go fast, washing the car, claying the car, sanding the car, buffing the car, polishing the car, putting the coat in the car. That takes a lot of time from start to finish. So why would I want to do it in any other way that's going to take longer by using an orbital to pull out sanding marks? Sure, you can do it. But if that's your style, you're not in a hurry, go for it. For me, it's not that I'm in a hurry. It's just my wife is beautiful. At some point, I want to go home and get some dinner, spend some time with the wife. Okay, so there is a strip of the Dr. Beasley's NSP 150, and most of the time this is a product that is used on an orbital polisher on the face of with a foam pad. And what you would do is you would put down 3 or 4 dime-sized drops. But when you're using a rotary, you got to keep in mind you've got a lot of dry fiber here, and some of this liquid is going to get brought up into this wool and kind of saturate into it. So you're going to lose some off the surface. So what I like to do is put a strip of product down, and I take this pencil when I teach classes. And if you look, it's about a strip of product about as thick, tall, wide, and long. It's just your average pencil. And that's just a good reference point as to how much to use. Now, before you ever do any kind of buffing with the wool pad on a rotary, you want to own a spur. You want to lock this against your leg, bring your speed up. I like to go all the way up to the 6 and run this over the front. And that just ensures there's nothing on there that could put a arc scratch, A-R-C, an arc scratch. That's what happens when you have a particulate on your pad and you're buffing with a rotary. It usually doesn't leave a perfect circle. It just kind of leaves these arcs everywhere. And the reason I know is because I've done this before and had to rebuff out a car because I didn't keep my pad clean enough. Now, the other thing I just want to stress is this really important that pad is completely centered. And this one's close, but it's not perfect. So I'm going to try to recenter it, and I'll spend, that's worse, I'll spend as long as it takes to get this thing right. And there's a couple of reasons for that. That's perfect. It isn't vibrating, it isn't hopping around in my hand, it's perfectly centered. But the reason you want to do that is so as you're buffing, that pad is smoothly rotating against the finish. If it's off a little bit, it's going to be like an orbital. You're going to have parts of the pad that are spinning get closer than some that come away, and it'll be like this as you're buffing. And it's okay if you did a spot like 12 inches by 12 inches, but if you're going to buff an entire car, it's just going to be faster, more effective, and easier on you to invest the time center your pad. And then, you know, all pads are different. This is a Lake Country pad, but then once you get it centered, it's real easy just to take a Sharpie or an ink pen and just come in here and just lightly let that thing rub against there. And you will take, and I'll pull this off and show you. And what you'll do is you'll create an outline of where the backing plate is. And then what that means is every time in the future when you go to put this on, it'll be faster and easier to get it centered because you got a reference point to go by. And of course, someone asked me about this on YouTube the other day ago, and I said, over time, that mark, the Sharpie mark or ink pen mark, does wear off, but you can put it back on there again, so it's not a big deal. Okay, then this is called the 10 at 10 technique, and all this is just a way to pick that product up without throwing it everywhere. And here's how this works. You're going to lay your pad to the right side of that strip of product. You're going to pick this up about 10 degrees, okay? And as you look at this, think of it as a clock. Here's midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and so on. You want to pick that bead up at about the 10 o'clock. And here's what that's going to do. You lay this down flat. It's actually touching the paint. You pick it up. So now just the back part of the pad is touching the paint, and that's going to keep the product from flying everywhere. And then you're going to run that strip in, lifting this up at 10 degrees at the 10 o'clock mark. Now watch, this is what happens. The pad is, as you look down on it, is spinning clockwise. So it's spinning like this. So you're going to bring that, you're going to come across that product like this. And instead of throwing it everywhere, it's going to pull it into the pad. So that's why the 10 at 10 technique works so well without throwing splatters, because you just have figured out the aspects, the dynamics of spinning pad and product on surface. And plus you look like a pro when you do it. Now, if you're really good at it, you go like this. You don't throw any product anywhere. Then the next thing I want to do is I just want to kind of break in my pad a little bit. And I'm also testing to see how hard this paint is. Okay, so I just sanded with 2500. And just now, all I did was make a few passes. There you can see it's base coat, clear coat. There's no red paint coming off. And the goal is by the time I'm done with this whole car, there's no red paint anywhere on any pad. That's a bad sign. Now I just want to take and wipe this off. I'm going to grab my swirl finder light. I'm going to grab my swirl finder light. I had two of them up here. Oh, it's over here on the table. And what I want to do is I want to inspect the paint, and I want to see that the sanding marks are gone. Now, there's still going to be holograms, but I'm looking for these hash marks or little tick marks. That would be the sanding marks. So after that tiny, seconds worth of polishing, I've completely pulled out all the sanding marks. So when we talk about soft paint versus hard paint, I'm going to say this is on the medium to soft side because I didn't push hard, and those sanding marks came right out. Now, what I don't want to see is after buffing and buffing, sanding marks, because that would tell me the paint is probably hard, and it's going to be really difficult to get all the sanding marks out. Okay, so now that I've kind of proven to myself that I can pull the sanding marks out using Dr. Beasley's NSP 150 primer, and just in case you guys don't know about these products, they actually come in squeeze bags. That way, when you're done with them and you throw them away, they don't fill up a landfill. So it's kind of green. It's a green, it's a technology, just a green practice, trying to be good stewards of the earth. They come in 4 different products. We got the 150, the 95, the 45, and the Z1. And that number, it indicates the particle size. So in this case, for 150, it's 1.5 microns in diameter. So nanoparticle size, very, very tiny. And all the particles are perfectly round with facets cut into them. And so no matter where they're out on the surface, they're always cutting uniformly. And there's nothing else like it on the market today. And they're exclusive to Dr. Beasley's. Okay, so anyway, that's a little bit about the abrasive technology. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to take out my sanding marks up here next to this edge. And this is why I tape this off so I don't throw splatter down there. And another technique, I'm going to go through a lot of technique. But, a lot of times I see guys using tools, they're like this. This is normal. One hand on the head, one hand on the back or the handle. The problem is now my big monkey hand is here with my arm. And sometimes it's going to be hard to see what's going on at the surface level. So I'll take and hold it back here and hold the tool like this. And that way I can see exactly what's going on. Let me pick this up. Just going to pick up a part of it and drag it over here. And then I'm going to start buffing. And that brings me to another point. As you see me buffing, you see me going back and forth. And not only is that because you want to keep the rotary moving, but what I'm doing is I'm looking to see if my sanding marks are gone after those few passes. And if they are, then I know I can move on to new territory. And the other thing I like about a wheel pad on a rotary is when you're using an orbital polisher with a microfiber pad or with the foam pad, you're usually dialing in a test spot, and then you're doing a certain amount of section passes, going over that section in a crosshatch pattern or running at the length of a thinner panel, running at the length of the panel. And you want to dial in a process where, you know, if you did it here and it took 8 section passes to get all the swirls and scratches out here, you could probably do 8 section passes over the rest of the car and should get the same results. But when you jump over to a wheel pad with the rotary, now you're not doing section passes, knowing that a certain amount will get it out. You're just buffing till the sanding marks, in this case, where swirls and scratches, if you didn't sand, are gone, then move on. You don't do section passes. You buff till you see the defects are gone. I also like to bring this up to the 3, which is like 1100 RPM. On boats, on gel coat, on this tool, I go all the way to the 6. But on clear coat paint, single stage paint, I kind of like around that 3 section. Or the 3 speed setting. Sorry about that. Okay, and then remember the trim? Instead of avoiding it, I'm going to run the polisher over it. Let's see if we pull any color. See the gray coming off? Tarnish. Okay, so now I'm going to clean my pad and keep working these scratches out. Okay. Okay, just to point out, the 10 and 10 technique is relative. Once you figure out this approach, instead of picking a strip of product up at 10 degrees at the 10, what if you went this way but pulled it in at the 4? It's the same idea. It's going to pull it into itself. So when you come up to a section like this, just reverse your direction and pick it up at the 4 o'clock. The same thing would apply if you just wanted to go up or come down. All you got to do is just get used to understanding how that product is going to get picked up and pulled into the pad, and then buffing will be a lot faster and easier for you the rest of your life. Now, I will share a technique for doing vertical panels, because not everything that you buff is always going to be this nice big flat hood, like a table almost. But for example, in our boat detailing classes, we're buffing out the side of a boat. And always keep in mind, the side of a boat doesn't look like this. It looks like this. It's a V-shaped. And so that hole is going away from you. That taxes all these muscles. But instead of trying to throw a strip up there, which sometimes it just lands on the ground, then trying to pick that up, all you do is just take and put your product in the center of the pad. Make a little circle around the pad. Then you would put that against the hole, spread it around, and start buffing. So that's another technique instead of using the 10 at 10 technique. And the reason you put it around the center is because if you put it around the outside, it would just all fling out. And you'd have it all over yourself and the walls, other cars, people. This paint is actually buffing really nice, which I'll take any day. So let me talk about another controversial topic when using a rotary polisher. I always spread my product out. And a lot of times I'll do that flat, and then I'll go up on edge like that, or like that. And people will say, well, Mike, that's bad technique. Well, it is in your world, but in my world, it's how I buff out a car with the rotary and not tire myself out. And the reason for that is because as your pad becomes wet with product, if you try to hold this thing flat, sometimes this area will grab and jerk you, but now you move it along and now this side grabs and it jerks you. And the whole time you're buffing, it's grabbing and jerking you around. When you go up on edge, you completely eliminate that. It smooths everything out, so you're not going to be tired. And then people will say, well, Mike, if you go up on edge, like right now, I'm on edge, running down this edge of the hood here, pulling my scratches out. When you go up on edge, Mike, you're going to be putting more pressure to a smaller footprint or smaller area. Therefore, you're going to put in deeper holograms. Like, I never figured that out before. So let me tell you about that. That could be a problem. You could be putting in deeper hologram scratches if you're using junk abrasive technology. So one thing I don't do is I never use junk. And I know it's easy to think that, well, it's the year 2024, Mike. You know, we got electric trucks and smartwatches and, you know, isn't everything on the market good? And I'm sad to say, I wish it was, but it's not. There's abrasive technology out there that is just absolutely horrendous. And what that means is it'll remove a defect, but then it leaves its own defect behind. And now you're just wasting time and taking paint off needlessly. There's some really deep scratches over here, but the whole goal of buffing this out is the owner wants to sell it and he wants it de-swirled. So the deeper scratches are what we call rids. They're still going to be there. I would try to take them out 100% if the owner gave me permission to go as far as I felt I needed. And if a mistake were to happen, I would not be responsible for buying him a new paint job. But since that conversation has never taken place, I'm not doing that. Okay, so I just want to kind of run right down the edge here, just a little bit of product. And I'm going to go up on extreme edge. Look, no red paint. Now this is spinning this way, so instead of coming into it and throwing it up on the camera lens, I'm going to come back on it. And I just want to make sure I got all those sanding marks out. Even though I stayed a thumbnail distance away, sometimes your hand wavers a little bit, especially when you get old and shaky. I just want to make sure that they're all the way out. It's important when you're sanding to get all the scratches out during the wool pad process. Now, paint's kind of forgiving, so it is possible if you didn't get all the scratches out that you could come back and remove them with your DA. That is true. But for the most part, you know, if at all possible, try to get 100% of the sanding marks out when you're doing this step, and it'll make everything go faster and easier and keep the temperature on the paint cool. By the way, the wool pad on Rotary is very cool. You know, wool cutting pad on Rotary. You put a foam cutting pad on a Rotary and you'll tend to generate a lot of heat really fast, and then you risk burning the paint, and you also risk even twisting the paint. It's a term called twisting paint. It's where you heat it up and then the Rotary spins the paint into a little twisted circle. Been there, done that on the president of the Southern California Vipers Club, Red Viper at McGuire's years ago. Luckily, I was able to fix it. Okay, so now what I have is I've got this thing sanded and compound. The sanding marks are gone. There's still some deeper rids here and there. And of course, you have to ask yourself, the deeper scratches, how did they get there? You know, did someone put a bag of groceries here and pull it off? You know, I don't know. But when I teach my detailing classes, you know, we talk about rids and customers' expectations. And when someone brings a car to you and it's got a lot of defects, this is what I teach my class to do. Talk to the owner and ask him a couple questions. So, Bob, did you buy this car new? Now, if Bob bought it new, he'll say, yeah, of course I bought it new. Well, Bob, whatever you're doing, quit doing that. You're putting deeper scratches in, you know, and he'll go, oh, I didn't know that. All people know is how to start the car nowadays. Okay. Now, if you say, Bob, did you buy this car new? And Bob says, oh, no, I bought it used. Then without missing a beat, you say, did you get a good deal? And everybody says, oh, yeah, I got a great deal. Well, that's what you get for a good deal. You get these deeper scratches. Take all that money you save, getting a good deal, and go get the thing painted. I'm a detailer. I have so much little paint to work with. There's not much I can do. You know, in the case of a factory finish, I always like to keep Post-it notes around. Here's your basic Post-it note. And if you have a quality paint thickness gauge and you measure that, it's around 3 mils. The factory clear coat on a modern car is 2 mils. So you can hand this to somebody and say, well, you know, I see you've got some deeper scratches here on your Lexus, Bob. I don't know if I'll be able to get those up because the paint's thin. It's not that I can't do good work. It's just I don't have much to work with. Here, Bob, hold this between your thumb and finger. Feel how thin that is? And Bob will say, yeah, that's really thin. Okay, that's 3 mils. Your clear coat's thinner than that Post-it note. And his, really? Because people can wrap their brain around how thin that is. And you go, yeah, and your clear coat's thinner. And even if I were to take out the deeper scratches without going through the clear, I'll have left that clear coat so thin that exposed to the sun and rain, remember, water is a universal solvent. It breaks things down. It softens things. Expose the elements, you could get clear coat failure there. And I'm sure most of you have driven around or walked into parking lots and seen cars where the paint looks like it has a rash on the hood, the roof, and the trunk lid, or the top of the pickup bed rails, you know, and that's where the sun and the water is beating down the most, and it just disintegrates the paint over time. So that's why, as a professional, sometimes even though maybe you feel like you could go deeper, you don't want to go too deep because you don't want to, it just wouldn't be a professional thing to do to the owner of the car. Okay, so we'll put the NSP 95 over here, or 150. And then down here, I have the red beast inside. This is number 66. This is where they melted down the engine of a car. I think it's a 40 or 41 Willys over in Germany called the Beast. They melted down the engine and made some of the aluminum components from that motor. So it's called RBI, Red Beast inside, or inside the tool is the heart of the beast is the idea. Anyway, the president, Christian Neuner of Flex over in Germany, he personally gave this to me at Automechanica a few years ago. And I thought about putting it in a glass case, you know, showing it off. And I thought, nah, I'm going to use it. And I let all my students use it too. Okay, so now we're using the NSP 95. You could think of this as a light polish. This is a foam polishing pad on an 8mm gear-driven orbital. And I know the camera can't probably pick this up, but anytime you're using an orbital, if you turn it on and you look, you'll see two perimeters, the inner perimeter and an outer perimeter. And that gap between the outer and the inner is what the orbit stroke is. In this case, it's 8mm. If I grabbed the Bigfoot 21 back there and did the same thing, you see this little perimeter and this big perimeter, and that huge space in between the two perimeters is 21mm. That's how you can tell. This is also gear driven. Listen, okay, it's not free spinning, so it has a ton of power. And one of the reasons I like using the Beast is because two reasons. One, zero pad stalling. And I know some people will make the argument that a pad on a free spinning random orbital doesn't have to both rotate and oscillate. As long as it's jiggling there, it'll take defects out. That may be true, but it'll take a long time. So I want to remember my personal detailing size. I like to get in, get out, as I like to say. So I don't want to waste my time with pad stalling, especially when you like, this is a concave curve here. This is a concave curve here. You know, so anytime you have curves or thin panels, it can be really tough. But the other reason I like it, and I'll show you this real quick before I get started. Here's the 95. Is because it's gear driven. You can go up on edge and knock out thin panels. Here's a thin panel without the pad stalling out. And so here's the really big picture point of that. So instead of every time I got to go to a thin panel, putting this tool down and grabbing a micro tool, the smaller pad to tackle that, I just make the tool that's in my hand do what I want it to do. And I can get through a car without swapping tools and swapping pads all the time. But to do an edge like this, and I want to come up here and get the edge, I'm just going to show you how. First thing I want to do is I'm going to lubricate the edge. Now I could do that like this. Grab some product and paste it on. Grab some product and paste it on. Just the edge here. So when I go up on edge, this has got two things, lubrication and abrasives. But instead, this is what I show in my class. Put the cord over your shoulder, obviously. And then just bring it up to small speed. And then slowly just kind of walk it in there. Real slow. Okay, and now the edge is lubricated. I didn't have to do this. So that's why I do that. Okay. Now I'm going to put just a little bit of product up here. And I'm going to come down, the same idea. I'm going to edge the panel, then I'll come back and take out the major flat surfaces. Going up high speed. Okay, and at this step, what I'm trying to do is I just want to pull out my holograms. So anytime you use a fiber pad on a rotary, you impart hologram scratches. Some guys just call them holograms because they are technically a scratch or void in the paint. I like to call them hologram scratches, not just holograms. All you other guys can call them whatever you want. But I'm just trying to pull the holograms out. And because I'm using great abrasive technology, when I use the NSP 150, this didn't leave any holograms. It's the fibers of the wool pad that are cutting, because they're a form of abrasive that cut their own scratch pattern in there. So now I just got to pull the holograms out. So I'm just going to put a little bit of product along here, very scant amount. And this thing spins counterclockwise. So actually, I'd want to come at it backwards to pick these up, and then to pull it into the pad. And anytime you're working on a car, here's a tip. Have your feet planted securely. Usually for me, in this case, in the middle, I'm around the tires. And you always want to start in the middle and work your way out. Don't start on the outside and work your way in. It's not that big a deal, but you need to have a method to the madness every time you buff out a car. You don't want to go to the garage and go, how should I buff out the car this time? Like it's a different thing. So just have a method to your madness. Start on the inside, work your way out. Okay, now I'm going to tie those three sections together with just one long pass. I'm going to bring my pressure up. Real light pressure. Okay, moving on. Okay, notice I never added any more products. So the Dr. Beasley's NSP primers are concentrated. What Chris Ricana always likes to tell people, and now I copy him, is use half as much or twice as long. And also, look how big of an area after I kind of edged it, I'm tackling here. So that's another thing I like about a gear-driven orbital, whether it's the Miele, the Makita, the Harbor Freight Hercules, or the Flex. Because you got this power, instead of working smaller sections at a time, you can tackle big panels. And a lot of times in my detailing classes, like for example, you can kind of see the Camaro back there. That thing is totally wiped out. And but I would take the hood of that and I would show how to fix the entire half of a hood at one time, and just to show the power. And it is impressive. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and make like 4 more section passes there, then we'll wipe off and look. That's 2. And when I'm by myself working on a car, I always count my section passes out loud, so I know where I'm at. Otherwise, my mind will wander, and then I forget where I'm at. And then I'll do a few more passes to make sure I did enough passes to get all the defects out. And I'll have easily added another hour buffing time to a car. So that was 3. Now I'm just using just the weight of the machine, really light pressure here. Okay, there's a total of 4 section passes. I went over that whole half of the hood 4 times. I went this way, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what it means to do a section pass. The amount of passes it takes to go over that section. We'll wipe off and look, and this is the first time I worked in this car, so I'm hoping it looks good. Now, if this paint was really soft, it could be even a foam polishing pad, or the fact that that's a gear-driven tool, which has a lot more power than a free-spinning random orbital tool. It could be that combination could leave some micro marring, just the pad itself. Pad has a certain amount of cut. But if the paint isn't too soft, then you can get away with just 1 step. Okay, and that looks good. So that was 2 steps. And it's a good idea to go around the edges, make sure I got all my sanding marks out. Oh, right there, just a few little sanding marks I didn't get out. Normally, if I was on camera, I probably would have walked to the front of the car, and just would have been less of a reach for me. But that's okay. Let me just knock those out real quick. Just like that. Okay. There wasn't that many, so I know it isn't going to take that much buffing to get them out. Okay, those are gone. Okay, and next come back. There's 3 dime-sized drops. Cord over shoulder. One more pass, just for good measure. Okay, I would call that good. Here's another little tip. I hammer on this to you guys all the time. Whenever you're going to be wiping paint that you've polished, always visually inspect your towels and feel them with your hands, because a lot of times your hand will detect something your eyes cannot see. And the reason this is so important, that's just a piece of white cloth, and I'm going to take it out of there anyway. The reason this is so important is because it takes hours to buff out a car, and it only takes seconds to put a scratch in. Fold it 4 ways. Here's my edges. I'm going to take this as my clamps on my index finger and thumb. I'm going to clamp those edges, lay this thing down flat, spread my fingers out, now kind of scrunch them. So now I've got really good grip on that towel. Now, overlapping circular motion, go ahead and pull all this residue off. That looks good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the ceramic coating on this side. And, well, if I do that and I go over to that side and buff out that side, I'm going to get everything messy. I know Victor's probably going to take this video and chop it down. So that's one of the reasons I don't want to make it too long. I think everybody watching this could get the basic concepts down. Okay, so that is wiped off. I'll go ahead and coat this. If I get it dusty, I'll just fix it. Okay, so now I'm going to use the Dr. Beasley's MX ceramic coating. This is a 2-component system. Starts out with the paint coating builder and then the MX ceramic coating itself. So when you buy this, it comes with an applicator pad, and usually what I will do is I will just take them, because it's color coded. Red is always, a stop sign, a flashing emergency red. I can think of that as the coating part, and then the gray side, or whatever the color combination might be at the time, I will use that for the paint coating applicator. A couple of mists right here, and then you apply this just like you would a coating. And one of the things is, as you're applying it, you can actually, when you go to wipe it off, you'll feel that paint become very slippery, which is something your customers always like, something, as a car owner, you will like. Nobody likes their paint to feel tacky or rubbery. And in the early days of coatings, a lot of the coatings were very tacky and rubbery. I remember one time I used the coating on some guy's car. It's a Corvette, and I don't remember what it was, but when you went to try to wipe that with just a spray detailer and a microfiber towel, the towel literally would grab the paint. And I thought, gee, this guy ain't gonna be able to take care of this. He's not gonna like it. And I'm hoping most of those days are behind us. Just like if you bought a phone last month and you go down and buy another phone, the technology is so far advanced from the one you bought, and it's only been a month. Things are always changing. That includes chemistry in the paint care world. Okay, so then you want to let that set up for about 2 or 3 minutes. And what that's going to do is it's going to create anchor points on the paint for the next product to actually attach and make a stronger bond to. So it's all about getting this surface defect-free, getting it smooth and clean, then applying whatever your choice of LSP or last step product would be. I meet people all the time that still like to use an old school Carnauba wax. And if it's a garage clean, that's more than adequate, Some people like a quality synthetic paint sealant. And I love synthetic paint sealants. They're quick, fast, and easy. But when it comes to real longevity, the thing that separates a ceramic coating from a car wax or synthetic paint sealant is that the material itself is stronger, more durable, more corrosion and deterioration resistant. And so if you can just get that to make a strong bond to the finish, then you got that layer of protection that'll outlast a wax or synthetic paint sealant. So that all has to do with the prep work. So after about 2 minutes, then go ahead and just softly wipe this off. See, this is what I'm talking about. This towel is just gliding over the surface here. Even though there's residue there, it's very slippery. And like I said before, I've never met anybody that goes, yeah, I love it when my paint's grabby. I love that feel. For us in the car world, and I know all you guys have done this before, you go to a car show and you see cars like this and they're just a swirled out mess. And it drives you up the walls because you could fix it. But regardless, sometimes it can be very, very hard to get people that own cars like this to trust you with them. Okay, so now here's the Nano MX ceramic coating. Got a little eyedropper here. I'm just going to put some of this across the top. Oh, look at that, I'm almost out. It's okay, I got another bottle over there. And for the first time I use a dry pad, I like to go a little heavier. Once this becomes wet with product, then you can just use a few drops. If you've never used one of these coating savers, if I were to take a pair of scissors and cut this open and pull the microfiber off and show it to you, on the inside is a plastic or a membrane. And what that does is it keeps the coating from soaking into the foam where it's wasted, obviously. Now, when it comes to coating a panel this big, most guys would probably do it in sections. I'm going to do it in sections, but there's a couple different ways if you've never installed the coating. And none of this is like rocket science, but instead of starting here and then doing this, a lot of times the guys will make an X pattern. Okay, and since there's a heavy amount of product when I make these first 2 passes, that X pattern, there's more product there. Now when I go back and forth, I'll be picking that up and spreading it out. A lot of guys like to box it in. So here's the section I'm going to tackle. So they'll outline it, make a box around it, and then they'll start making their overlapping passes. And this is just something where you want to just take your time. The whole goal is to have uniform product placement, get every square millimeter coated with the coating. And this is a coating that bonds instantly to the paint. So after you apply this one, you wait anywhere from 30 seconds to about a minute, then take a clean microfiber towel and wipe it off. Now, recently I saw one of my longtime friends tell people to apply coatings in a circular motion, and I would agree with that. It's personal preference, really. You think about it like this. If this isn't scratching the paint, this clean, soft microfiber, there's nothing abrasive in the coating itself, and the surface is clean, then there's nothing scratching the paint. So it doesn't matter if I go in a circle, a straight line, or if I make my name, Mike, whatever it takes for you to be happy to spread the product out. That is probably the biggest, most important thing. But here's what I will tell you. When it comes to a crosshatch pattern, It's just easy to monitor how many times you've went over the surface. You can easily see through overlapping your passes that you're getting 100% coverage over the finish. And if you have employees, it's really easy to train them to do that. Applying products into overlapping circular motion is actually better at spreading a product out than back and forth lines. But once you got it spread out, then it's just more uniform just to make it back and forth. But hey, however you guys want to do it is all good. Okay, so by the time I rambled on there for a few seconds, 30 seconds at least is applied. And again, I'm fortunate that I am so lucky. My wife comes down here and washes and dries and folds, and then she's got a set of tweezers. Here, I'll walk off camera and show you. This is so important. Everybody, every enthusiast and every detailer should have some tweezers in their shop. And then if you're going along and say your hand feels something, you can separate the fibers, reach down there and pull that sucker out, okay? So keep some tweezers handy. Now, once your towel is past your visual inspection, your tactical inspection, then again, fold this 4 ways, okay? And then you want to grab the edges between your clamp. There's your human clamp. Lay this thing down, spread your fingers out, then scrunch them. You're scrunching that towel between them. And now you've got a really good grip on the towel. Now, it's not so important on a hood, a roof, or trunk lid. But as soon as you go to the vertical sides, you don't want to be dropping your towels on the ground. So it's just a little extra technique there to keep you from dropping that towel onto the ground and possibly getting it contaminated. And then when you go to use it the next time, you put scratches in the paint. So, okay, so that part is done. And let me go ahead and knock out the other part here. And just a little comment on scratches in paint. And I always like to try to make things really simple for people to understand. Let's assume you buy a brand new car. So let's just pick on Honda, okay? Here's my X pattern. I'm going to box it out. Now overlap. Say you just bought a brand new 2024 Honda CR-V, and that, admittedly one of the most popular SUVs on the market today. Thing will run for 300,000 miles, no problem. Okay, so you got this brand new car. Now let's assume when you purchase it at the dealership, it was flawless. There's not a single scratch or swirl in it. It's brand new. Okay, 3 years down the road, you wash that car and you look at it. Now you see all kinds of swirls and scratches. So the question is, if there weren't any swirls and scratches to start with, where did they all come from? So let's think about this. Let's make it really simple. If nothing's touching the paint, is it getting scratched? No. So it's only when we touch it that it gets scratched, or when we run it through a spitting brush or soft mop or spitting mop, a car wash, and those things beat against the paint and scratch it. But that means the things that touch your paint, let's count them out: wash mitts, drying towels, wiping microfiber towels. If you keep all 3 of those things clean and uncontaminated, you'll go a long way in as far as keeping that finish swirl and scratch free, because it takes hours to buff out a car, but it only takes seconds to put a scratch in. And it's because the things we touch the paint with become contaminated. And oftentimes, you can't see on camera, there's a 36 Ford, there's a 78 Camaro, there's a 65. When I work on these cool cars for my friends here in town, if I look behind the seat or in the trunk, I usually find their collection of microfiber towels. They're usually Sam's Club or Costco. And if I take and I look at them, they're completely contaminated, and here they are at the car show wiping their car down with them and then wondering how come their paint's all scratched up. So just keep that in mind. If nothing else, put a couple of these in a 1-gallon Ziploc bag or a bag you got at 7-Eleven. Keep your towels clean, keep some spray detour with you, and just make sure everything that touches the paint is clean and dry. Anyway, that is how I would tackle this car. Originally, I was just going to compound it with a wool pad and the NSP 150, but after coming in and doing some paint thickness readings with my Defect paint thickness gauge, which I've lost, the paint showed to me is anywhere between 12 and 14 mils, a little thicker in some places. And my brain thinks like this. Normally, I want to talk to the painter if I want to do any sanding. I didn't have that opportunity this time. But here's what I know. When a car like this gets restored, and this has been restored, at some point the trim is off, the bumpers are off, It goes into the body shop and it gets painted. At that point, most respectable painters, they're not going to just put a cover coat on. They're going to put some paint down, okay? Guys paying them to paint the car, it's going to put some paint down. So I like to just assume that, you know, whoever painted it, they actually did put 2 to 3, maybe 4 coats. In this case, it was base coat, clear coat, so clear coat paint. Now, that's doing a lot of this, crossing your fingers and hoping, and you know what happens when we assume. We can get in all kinds of trouble. But I've always had really good luck in the industry, but here's the thing I do. I practice using great abrasive technology. I use the right tool for the job, a right pad for the process, and of course, good technique. And knock on clear coat, everything comes out good. That's all I really got. I'm going to jump over to the other side and knock that out. I think I'll let the camera keep rolling. If anybody is just now getting out of bed, they're kind of sleepy, getting their coffee and a donut, feel free to watch. If you want to log off and quit watching, it ain't going to hurt my feelings, okay? I got another workstation set up over there, so I'm just going to move over. I think I got everything I need. And thank you for watching. And if you are local to Stuart, next Saturday, I have a one-day class. This is one of the cars that'll be there. It's a 78 Camaro. I got the 36 Ford and I got a 52 Hudson coming in. All are in really bad shape. And this is a paint correction and ceramic coating class. We will start out in the morning doing an extreme prep wash. And because I like to cover a lot of techniques that are important in the prep wash process, because that's really where the magic happens, is where you start, not where you finish. And but it's a fun class. The class is $600. And when I checked with Victor yesterday, he said there was still two spaces left. So if you want to get in on this class, I'd highly recommend it. You know, I always run into a lot of people that complain about the cost of having a professional polish and ceramic coat their car. Instead of complaining, come take the class, learn how to do it yourself. You'll save a lot of money by doing it yourself. And you can invest the time. You don't only have to do the whole car one time. You can do the hood in your garage one weekend, do a fender the next weekend. But the important thing is, by taking the class, you'll learn all the techniques, all the tools, all the products you'll need to do it yourself. And in the future, you could always do it. So you save a lot of money that way. And then quit complaining. Okay, so I'd already clayed this side. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sand it. Back to my Pixie sander. Up here, I've got this is a 2500 grit Eagle abrasives. They all have different colors and funky little names. This is called the Bufflex. Bufflex, one word. I'm going to start again doing what I call edge of panel. I'm going to bump this up to the 3. And then just run this back and forth. And as I explained earlier today, the reason I'm running this back and forth is because I'm monitoring to see when I've, in this case, reduced some of the surface texture and some of the orange peel. I'm not trying to get 100% paint flat, because again, I don't know who painted this and how much paint they put on. But that looks good to me. That is, it looks like it's flat. It looks like matte. It's so flat. It just sanded right down. Of course, you can see all the white stuff on that blue sanding. That's the paint. Anytime you scratch a clear coat, it turns opaque. If you scratch glass, it's kind of frosted looking. So then just drag that across a clean microfiber towel. Clean, ready to go. And this is called edging a panel. I'm staying about a thumbnail distance away from the trim and all the edges. There's no raised body lines on here, but here's a raised body line. Here's a raised body line. So I'd be doing the same thing, staying about a thumbnail distance away from trim, edges, and raised body lines. At a recent class I taught, someone says, well, Mike, can't you put that Pixie in rotary mode with a 1-inch pad? Or one of my favorite tools, the Rupes Long Neck Nano. Grab that tool in rotary mode and come back and just run it along and pull your sanding marks out right close to the edge without the risk of burning paint. And the answer is yes, of course you could do that. But how long will that take you? I mean, this is a pretty good sized car. It has a lot of edges. It has a lot of raised body line. It has a lot of trim. So not only would sanding take a long time, but pulling your sanding marks out with a 1-inch pad around all the edges, that'll take a long time. What's wrong with you? Oh, battery's loose. Solid. There we go. Okay. And then the reason I like to edge a panel is because it's really easy for me to come in here with this micro tool and guide it exactly where I want it to be, or what you could call surgical sanding. Okay, I have precise control over it. With your larger sanding discs, it's not that they're unwieldy, or hard to control, but they're just bigger. And it is a little harder to have the same kind of precise control you would get with this micro tool like this. And see, that's called edging a panel. So I teach the sanding aspects of detailing in our 3-day classes. My next 3-day class is coming up on September 20th and 21st and 22nd. So the first day is all paint correction. And the second day, we start doing an extreme prep wash, then go into sanding mode on a cool car like this. Then the third day is boat detailing. And for boat detailing, I bring in the worst condition, huge center console boats. And we start out machine sanding using gear-driven orbital polishers. And the reason we do that is because it has 0 sanding disc stalling problems. And quite frankly, gel coats come with anywhere between 20, 30 mils of gel coat. And usually, because the condition of the boats I bring in here are so bad, what we need to do is just immediately get rid of the deep oxidation, the deep staining. And buffing isn't going to do that. So usually sanding is required. And but anyway, you get a really good hands-on experience doing all the paint correction, sanding on real cars, not demo hoods, and then the third day is boat detailing. So I have 2 more of those classes this year, one in September and one in November after SEMA. Hopefully every year after SEMA, I'm able to get some of the really cool new stuff for the students to test out before anybody else in the world. Any of you manufacturers watching this, keep that in mind. If you want to get your tools actually in the hands of people, not get a chair with their butt in it, but get your tools in the hands of people for them to play with, and consider contacting me and saying, hey, we got a new widget. We'd love to have you show that in your class there in November. Okay, so this is called edging a panel. And now I can just come back with the big 6-inch DA and it's real easy just to sand up to where I've already sanded instead of trying to get real careful and get next to that edge. Okay, look, 2,500 of it. Look how much clear you're pulling off. Eagle Abrasives, the best dry sanding system, in my opinion, in the world. They really have a nice system. They also have a nice hand sanding system with their own blocks, their own interface pads, and their own sanding discs. Okay, so there's just one pass over that. I'm going to clean this off. I've already wiped that off, and now I'm going to hit it again. So I went this way, and I'm going to just come back and go this way. And someone asked me, how much pressure are you putting down on that sander? I'd say easily about 5 pounds. I'd probably use a lot less pressure if this was like 1,000 grit or 1,200. But being 2,500, in order to, as I like to say, engage the abrasives with the paint, I want to put a little bit of pressure on there. And again, I just want a little bit of sanding disc rotation. I don't want that thing spinning out of control, because that's no longer sanding. That would be called grinding. So I have no idea if the camera can see this, but if you look right here, these little white marks here, these are actually deeper scratches. These are not going to come out under my watch. If this was my own car, I'd probably go for it. But again, this is not my car. So. It's a low spot right there. Okay, so I went over that twice now. Now, 2 passes, look how uniform that's starting to look. Very matte, very flat. It feels very smooth in my hand. The deeper scratches are now standing out like a sore thumb. Here's some, here's some, here's some, here's some, here's some, here's some. And I took pictures of these before I started. I just like to photo document the before condition of all my work. And I knew going into this that I was not going to be the guy that took those out. There's a certain amount of, there's something to be said for experience. The best way to learn how to not buy someone else a paint job is to buy them a paint job. Like, sorry about that. I'll pay to have that repainted, So been there, done that a couple of times in my life and learned from it and ain't doing it again. I'm going to go ahead and go over this a couple more times. Flatten this out. When I started, I could tell that this side of the hood was, in fact, in a lot worse condition than the other side of the hood. The back side of this has pigtails, and I was thinking about setting the camera up and doing that, but I don't want to shoot this direction, and I don't feel like moving everything, so I probably won't. There'll be plenty of cars in the future to do this again. I got a 55 Bel Air coming up. I got a sand down. I got a 1968 Camaro with a custom paint job coming up to sand down. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to show sanding and buffing again in the future. Okay, look all that good. Oh, thank you to everybody that joined me today. I started this project just because I was going to be down here anyway. I don't know about all the instructors in the car detailing world, but I actually do the thing I talk about. And I enjoy it. I really like working on cool stuff like this. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of working on a 2014 Honda 4-door Accord in beige metallic, okay? There's millions of them out there. I don't ever see a catalog coming out in 20 years with all the parts you need to restore one like you do find with cars like this. So I just kind of like the timeless body lines and the big V8s and things like that. Okay, so now that I've sanded this down to my satisfaction, the next thing to do is go ahead and pull my sanding marks out. Again, we're back over here to Mr. Rotary Buffer. I've already centered the pad up on this. I will take real quickly and clean this. So I got my spur. I'm going to lock this against my leg. I'm going to turn the speed all the way up to 6. I had someone make a comment. I got this article and a video, on the Dr. Beasley's blog, and I got a video on the Dr. Beasley's website on how to clean wool pads. It shows every conceivable way to clean a wool pad, including the Lake Country System 4000, the Grit Guard Universal Pad Washer, washing with a pressure washer, washing in the sink, to dry spurring. There's just everything you can think of. And in the one part where I showed how to put this on my knee, some guy said, "Hey, you're going to take your knee off." And I'm just thinking, really? I've been doing this a long time. I've never taken my good knee off or my other knee off. Okay, so there's my product. I covered this before. I'm going to use the 10 at 10 technique and just pick that up. This pad is dry, so I'm going to spread it around a little bit. Bring my speed up to 3. And then just make some nice, slow, overlapping passes. There's a technique called buffing off the edge. I remember teaching that technique with Joe Fernandez at this class he put on called the NXT, or the Next Institute. This was back in the heyday of McGuire's. We were up at I forget, where some museum someplace. Whole bunches of us were there. I think Jason Rose was there. Mike Pennington was there. A guy named Jaime was there. Kevin or Joe Fernandez was there. And the technique called buffing off an edge, if you could see this hood is higher than the fresh air grill. And so when I'm buffing, I want to buff in a way that the pad is coming off the edge, not coming into the edge. And then it makes it very easy to tackle that panel without burning through the edge. Anyway, that's called buffing off an edge. I'm pretty sure I got an article on that. At the time, my longtime friend Nick Rudder I used him as my hand model, so you'll see his hands holding a rotary, buffing off an edge off the back of, I don't know, a Honda or something. It's just for an article. I included the pictures in a book I wrote. And again, the reason you see me going back and forth in this herky jerky pattern is because I'm using the overhead lights and I'm actually watching. And as soon as I see the sanding marks gone, I want to go ahead and stop buffing in that area. And there's a technique, I wrote an article about this. It's been in my how-to books, but people always say, well, you don't want to get the paint hot. Well, of course you want to get the paint hot. But here's how you can tell if you're getting it too hot. It's called the flight or fight method. And simply place your hand down to the area you've been buffing. If you can continue to hold a conversation, it's just warm, probably okay. If you put your hand down and you go, ow, it's probably too hot. Probably let that cool down. But you can do that as you're working on the car, vertical panels, horizontal panels, just check once in a while. And especially if you're buffing in one area for way too long, like you're trying to fight a defect out. By the way, a lot of times when people are watching me buff, they'll see that as I'm buffing, I never turn the polisher off. I let it run while I'm doing things. That's because the whole time you let it run, it's pulling air through the battery, cooling the battery, down the tool body, cooling off the motor. It's just cooling itself off. And I do happen to have about 30 or 40 batteries here. So I always have plenty of batteries. We have a lot of flex cordless tools here for our classes. Really like them for the removing sanding marks so you don't got to mess with the cord, and also really like them for the boat detailing. Again, you just don't have to mess with the cord. And we always finish out anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 in our boat classes. And I do that on purpose. I don't have to, but I like to make the experience enjoyable for the students. A lot of them that take these classes have never sanded and buffed out a gel coat boat before. And it's a pretty arduous undertaking. And so I just like to make it a little easier. So if we sand to 3,000, then start buffing, it's just easier to buff. I tell them, when you go back to your world, if your budget doesn't allow you the extra sanding steps using higher grits to make buffing easier, then stop at 2,000 and push hard with the rotary for hours. It's always better to sand longer and buff less, in my opinion. I'm sure someone would argue with me on that. But I quit arguing years ago. Okay. Last little section here. Here, I'll show you the 10 at 10 in reverse. Just like that. Now, if it looks like I'm holding that pad flat, I'm not. I'm actually just tilted a little bit, just a little bit. So most of the cutting action is taking place on about a third of the pad. And again, the reason why is because as this pad becomes a little bit wet with product, if you try to hold it flat, what happens is a part of this pad will grab and yank you, and you keep buffing, and then another part grabs and yanks you. And the whole day long, you're being yanked around by your buffer. As soon as you go up on edge, you eliminate the problem. It's easier on you. You get the same results. And as long as you're using, good abrasive technology, you're not leaving a deep hologram just because you're going up on edge. Okay, got a little section up here. Hey, while I'm doing this, can I get someone to call me? I've always wanted to test out and see if I can talk during a live broadcast. So maybe someone out there's got a question. Hey, Mike, why did you do it this way? Or how long do you do that for? Give me a call. Let me just see if that works with my Bluetooth while I'm live here. Oh, Kirby. Yeah, answer. Hey, Kirby, how are you doing? Were you listening? Go ahead. Go ahead. I can hear you just fine. Okay, so good question. Kirby's question, by the way, Kirby is a longtime friend. I think he's attended, 3, 4, 5, 6 of my classes. You definitely hit the definition of alumni. So the question was, why not finish out with 45 instead of 95? And the reason why is because I just know from experience using a wool pad on a rotary that I'm going to need a little bit of power to pull them holograms out. 45 is ultra fine finishing polish. It just wouldn't have enough grunt to it. So that's why. A good question. And how did the paint look on the other side on camera there, Kirby? Yeah. Yeah, this is where we could use Yancey. And then he could bring the cameras. He would use a multiple camera system where I just have a fixed camera covering the entire project. So maybe someday we'll have a secondary guy down here. Yeah, who knows? Well, and I could try. Why don't and look, okay, so no red paint. That's a good sign. Okay, bye, Kirby. Okay, that's a good question, though. When you're doing show car work, and I'll be real honest, if I wasn't on camera, and I'll do it on this one, but I got to walk off camera to do this because I have polishing pads down here, but I don't have any finishing pads because I didn't plan on doing this. But yeah, if you're doing show car work, especially working on black paint, never hurts to, go that extra step. If it is a show car and it is show car detailing, then go to an ultra fine cut polish and a super soft foam finishing pad and make that your last step and really, really improve that finish. Okay, here's a beast foam polishing pad, NSP 95. Oops. Okay. Dry pad. I want to go with four drops there. Oops. Okay. That was 2, overlap by 50. That's 3, cord falling off. Yeah. That's 3. 4. 5. 6. I'm going to do a standard 8-section pass on this one. I'll follow it with a foam finishing pad. Is that 6, I think? That was 6. This would be 7. Okay, there's 8 solid section passes. You know, someone asked me the other day, go, Mike, how come you use 8 as your benchmark? Well, good question, and it's kind of relative. Depends on paint hardness, paint softness, also the defects of the depth of the defects you're trying to remove. But I know that usually 1 or 2 ain't going to do it, and 20 is too many. So I'm just trying to find a sweet spot in there that works on the average paint job for the average defects for the average goal, which is usually, 90% correction. There's 1. Two. Notice there's no dusting. 3. 4. 5. 6. This would be 7. Here's 8. Oh, the cord's falling off. For this one, I'm going to bring the pressure up just a little bit. Okay, 8 solid textbook example section passes. Well, after I do this section here, I am going to shut the camera off because I'm going to go knock out the trunk lid and then go down the sides on this thing. The goal, obviously, is to have this done today, and then if I get home in time, go float around the pool. I think it's around 80 or 90 degrees outside there today here in, as I like to say, sunny Stuart, Florida. It's also very humid out there. Some of you would not like that. The first 5 years I lived here, I shipped out a 1975 GMC Jimmy that I had pulled a small block out of and installed a 468 big block. And about a couple weeks after I lived out here, I got rear-ended in that truck, like hard, by a 3/4 ton Ford. I was stopped in the road, getting ready to turn right, waiting for oncoming traffic to go by me so I could turn in. And I'm looking behind me and go, man, those lights are sure coming up really fast. It was dark outside. And all of a sudden, boom, it hit me and spun me a 360. And it shoved the bed in to the point where the doors went open and close. So I pulled the doors off and threw them away. I'd already sold the hardtop. You know, the 75 to 69 to 75 were full convertibles. So you could unbolt the hardtop and there's just nothing past the windshield. I'm walking over here to get a foam finishing pad. Okay, so here's a Lake Country HDO black foam finishing pad. This is really soft. Before the cameras started rolling, I was putting my makeup on with this pad. It's that soft. And if you really want to do some show car work, let me go ahead and bust out a free spinning random orbital polisher. One of my favorite tools is actually the Rupes Bigfoot 21 for any time I'm working with large flat panels and trying to do show car quality work. I would agree with all the awesome instructors and leaders in our industry on the topic of car detailing that a free spinning random orbital polisher will tend to leave a nicer finish on the widest spectrum of paint types versus a gear driven, especially true for soft paints. There's a reason for that, and I'll try to explain that next. But if the pad is just nice and big and flat, then I think you will get better results by switching over to a free spinning. And let me dovetail that into what I mean. I see a lot of times people will complain about gear-driven orbitals, and this could be any of the brands that are out there, the Flex, now the Harbor Freight Hercules forced rotation, which is forced rotation, forced oscillation, not just one action. And the Rupes Mille, the Makita PO5000C. I'm sure there's some other companies that have come out with their own versions. But a lot of times what people do is they'll complain about that tool I was just using, gear-driven orbital. If you don't hold it quite right, it kind of yanks you around. It kind of pulls you around. Okay, that pulling is called power. Free spinning tools don't pull you because they don't have that power. They'll tend to slip and jiggle and vibrate versus grab that paint and pull. So the thing that all these guys and sometimes girls are complaining about is they're complaining about all that power, okay? They just don't know how to put it in the right perspective. Okay, so here's my, this is a 6.5 inch HDO Bigfoot 21. This is actually, I'm always so lucky to have this. This is the number 16 Mark II ever made. I think Franco, oh God, I can't think of his name. One of the marketing guys at Rupes gave this to me at SEMA when they launched them. I have this and I have the number 615 from that same event. Okay, so now we're just gonna go, come out of there, don't be shy. We'll go 4 little pea-sized drops like that. Okay. I'll crank this down to the 1. Let me kind of break this in a little bit. Get those abrasive particles to, kind of move around on the pad. Let's see how that looks. That looks good. Okay, spread this out. I'm gonna turn the speed up. There's 4. Okay, I'm gonna do this back section first. I'm gonna bump this up. There's about 4.5. There's something to be said to using a speed that allows that pad to more easily slide or to glide over that paint versus any kind of grabbiness. Sometimes I find if I go too slow with these tools, just a little too grabby for my taste. But this is, I mean, it doesn't get any smoother than the Bigfoot. This is a nice tool. That was 2, this is 3. Four. That was 4. We'll do 6. So here's 5. There's 6. Move on down the road here. Okay. There's 1. And I'm using, I'd say, about 2 pounds of pressure. You know, you need to apply a little bit. You can just use the weight of the machine, but it smooths out the action of the tool overall, you know, overall the surface here. And you know, you want to keep in mind that at some point you're trying to engage the abrasives with the paint so they can do their job. Mike Pennington shared an analogy with me that I always like, and I borrow from him. And it's the ice cream scoop analogy. And you know, if you take an ice cream scooper and you're scooping out ice cream and putting it in a cone, scoop out, well, the abrasives are taking little bites like an ice cream scooper would take out of the ice cream, taking little bites out. You know, we're talking tiny bites, but you know, you need a little bit of downward pressure to engage the abrasives with the paint so they will further refine it, further level it, further smooth it out, maximize gloss. And then for the last few passes, really just light pressure. I always say that, let me finish this pass. Okay, boy, that's a nice tool. I can't even count how many cars I've buffed out with this. It's just been hanging in there for years now. But I always say polishing paint is an art form. It is not a grinding process. You know, we as humans bring the human elements of care and passion to the process. And a grinding process is just kind of like a non-thinking, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, you know. I know some people refer to detailing as a craft, and that's true. It is a craft, but I think there's still, I just, you know, any of you guys that have spent your entire day or a couple of days working on some other person's car and really pouring yourself into it, you know, at that point, it's more of an art form than just a grinding process, as far as I'm concerned. At least that's how I think of it. Okay. And just using overhead lights. That looks good. In fact, I'd say this looks better than the side I did first, just by adding that little finishing step. And that could be probably because I'd say this paint, I wouldn't call it soft, but it's definitely not hard. I know what hard paint's like. I'd say it's on the soft side of medium. You know, so if you got soft, medium, hard, here's medium. It's just on the other side of medium, a little soft. That's a good for us as a detailer, because it's not too hard to get your defects out. It's the flip side of that coin is for the owner, they got to be more careful. Like harder paint will really hold up to a lot of abuse before it gets scratched. A lot of you guys know my counterpart in this industry, Yancey Martinez, and he's got a red eye Charger. That's the 4-door. He taught me that the Charger, they charge him more for the other doors. He's got a Charger, and you know, he'll admit he's probably only polished it out once or twice in his life. I think he's got a flawless finish, but he admits that the paint is super hard, and so that just helps people to maintain that flawless finish. Conversely, in my life in the last couple of years, we've had a 69 GTO over here. I had a 58 Impala over here. Both the GTO is single stage. The Impala is basically clear coat. But both of them, I mean, if you just wiped them like this, if you weren't careful, you could scratch them. That paint was that soft. And so, you know, we as some people that have good quality tools, like good microfiber towels, and know a little bit about technique, we can work on them and finish them out. But you give that back to the owner, you know, who knows how long that finish stays like that. Because again, most people, their towels are contaminated, their wash mitts are contaminated, their drying towels are contaminated. So, okay, so let's go ahead and throw the coating on here just to wrap this up, and then I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to come up here. I might just show you how I would tackle this area up here, just because people always say, well, you know, you sanded and buffed that. How are you going to do that? I'll show you a couple ways to skin that cat. Okay, so here's the paint coating builder. Here's the Nano MX gray side. There's one. Couple spritzes on there. Box this in. Okay, then just just a nice overlapping passes here. So the paint coating builder, in case you just joined us, this is a 2-part ceramic coating kit. In this first part, it acts to create anchor points. It's actually laying down a layer of material that the next product can better bond to, form a stronger bond. By the way, did everybody notice I never used the panel wipe? That is one of the benefits. Sometimes I forget to share that. All of the Dr. Beasley's NSP primers are 100% inorganic, no natural anything in there, completely synthetic. And there's nothing in them that will interfere with the bonding of the coating to the paint. So that means is after a thorough, removal of any residues, you can go right to the coating. You can skip the whole panel wipe step. And not only does that save you a lot of time, but on softer paints, the problem with coating soft paints is panel wipes aren't actually good lubricants. They're not a great slippery lubricants. Like I see people talking about using IPA, isopropyl alcohol, for a panel wipe, and that is such a hot solvent. It's nasty, and it doesn't wipe good over the finish. And so you risk actually marring the paint using a panel wipe. So the Dr. Beasley's primers help you to avoid that whole problem if you are working on soft paint, because you don't got to use a panel wipe. For hard paint, it's less of an issue. Okay. And you're supposed to let that sit in there about 2 or 3 minutes, but just for the sake of brevity, I went ahead and wiped it off after about a minute. Okay, here's the Nano Resin MX ceramic coating, and I'm going to knock this out in 2 sections. So here's my X pattern, box this in, then overlap it. And I can tell instantly that I've already put the paint coating builder on there because it just makes that surface very slippery and slick. And now this next product just kind of glides over it without any effort on my part at all. Is that 3 times? I always forget if I don't count. We'll call this 4. It's not so important that you do 4, 3, or 2, or 21. The important thing is that 100% coverage over the entire thing. Okay, so what do we got? 10 o'clock. Oh, awesome. We started early. Get out of here early. One thing I like about working on convertibles, you don't have the roof to buff out. So I did have to wash the top on this. It came in fairly dirty. And it just wasn't going to look good to make the paint look perfect and then send it out with kind of a, not brown, but it's not a vibrant, it wasn't a vibrant white like it is now. There's 2. Oh, gosh, I meant to wear gloves. If you look up here, I always forget when I'm doing video work. Here's my gloves. Make sure you wear gloves when you work with coatings. Do as I say, not as I do, I guess. Okay, then this is a product that you don't really, 30 seconds to a minute. It's formulated to bond instantly to the paint. So then just come back and gently wipe off. And if you're new to coatings, this first wipe here, this is actually referred to as leveling the coating. So you're taking some off, but you're also pushing it around just like you did when you were applying it. And you're just making sure that 100% coating covers over the entire panel. Then as I continue to wipe, of course, I'm pulling everything off. And it's important to remove all the coating because most coatings, if you don't get them completely off, once they set up, the only way to remove them is to polish them off. If they're really stout, you might have to compound them off. I will say I've had people say that sometimes you got to sand them off. I've never come across a coating I had to sand off. I've polished and compounded a lot of high spots off, but never had to resort to sanding. Anyway, there we go. That is beautiful. Okay, there you go. That's kind of the online class for today. We went over how to edge a panel. First, how to start out. We pulled the wiper arms off using that little tool I bought off Amazon. We taped off the fresh air grill to keep splatter and dust from getting down behind the grill where you can't get to clean it. I mean, you could go in there and pressure wash it. The problem with that is a lot of times the paint that is down there from restoration is really not very good, and you'll peel it off with the pressure washer. You don't want to put yourself in that position. So just cover it up. Let me take that off, and I'll show you another technique for tackling these kind of areas up here. And again, whenever you're pulling tape off, pull it slow and low. Give the adhesive time to release. Don't just yank it off. That is when you start to really get into trouble. But anyway, so we taped that off, then we sanded. We did what I call edge a panel. We took a 3-inch disc and just went around the outer edges where it's easy to control the sander and do precise sanding. We followed the rule of thumb, stayed about a thumbnail distance away from the edges and the trim. Then we came back and we pulled our sanding marks out using a wool pad with the NSP 150. Then we came back with a foam pad on the Beast and 95, NSP 95, and pulled out our holograms. Then we did show car detailing by really finishing out with NSP 45, a very fine cut polish and a very soft foam polishing pad. And we switched over to the Rupes Bigfoot 21, a free spinning random orbital, which will tend to leave a nice looking finish on softer paints, and any paint actually. It's just safer for softer paints. And then we applied the coating. And now all I got to do is the rest of the car. But let me just show you how I would tackle stuff like this, because you know, people get pretty OCD about this kind of detailing work. And what I'm going to show you will probably surprise some of you, because you'll be thinking, oh, gee, Mike, you're not the OCD detailer I thought you were. And you're correct. I'm not. I'm more of the lazy detailer. But this is a cotton applicator pad. It's just real simple cotton. I'm going to take some of the Dr. Beasley's NSP 150. And the goal with this is not so much to, like I would never come up here and try to sand this stuff unless the car was disassembled already. So all I want to do is just, you know, this is oxidized. It's got the same amount of swirls and scratches. So I'm just going to take and kind of rub this in. And all I want to do is just amp up the gloss so it's more uniform with the big panels that everybody's going to look up their eyes. So I just come down like this and then go back and forth on these grill vents like this. And I'm putting some passion behind the pad. That means I'm pushing hard. Now this I could get with a machine. I could come down here at the 3-inch Rotary, any 3-inch DA, and machine polish that. And I probably will once I turn the camera off and get working on this. But just to clean up this area here, if I just come back and put a little passion behind the pad, the terry cloth gives this product a little bit more bite, okay? And then after I work that, all kinds of icky stuff coming off there. And come back and wipe that off. And of course, then go ahead and coat this also. Or if you're using a car wax or a synthetic sealant, put that on there, whatever your LSP of choice is. But that's kind of how I would handle that. And now it's compared to that paint over there, it's got a nice dark, rich red appearance. So, you know, that's one of those things where you could invest hours and hours and hours into working just this one little small area. But a lot of times, more and more time, more and more work doesn't always mean more and more better results or more gooder results. So, you know, use some common sense. This last couple of weeks, I've posted a number of videos to my Facebook and Instagram pages, mostly showcasing the 36 Ford, the 78 Camaro, and the 52 Hudson. And in those videos, one of the things I pointed out was that whether you're an enthusiast or if you're a professional detailer, you need to have multiple approaches to how you handle a car, how you detail a car. What I see people that are new on the professional side do as they do multiple step show car detailing to every car they detail, even if it's a budget price detail, which means they end up working for $1 an hour. Don't do that. Have 3 packages. So real basically, a multiple step would be just like you saw me do here. You use a dedicated aggressive product, that in this case it was the NSP 150, followed by a less aggressive product. So that's 2 steps besides washing and claying, and then you put the coating on. That's a multiple step process, and usually that'll get you about 95% of defect removal, give you a show car look. Your next package would be just 1 paint correction step. So maybe a car comes in like this, the guy doesn't have the budget for your multiple step process, but he still wants the car shiny. So you hit this with NSP 95 or whatever your favorite 1 step or polish is, with a foam pad on orbital, and you let them know that, hey, this is my mid-range package. It's not going to get all the swirls and scratches out. I can do that for you, Bob, but it's my other package. I'll spend more time. It costs more money. So let them make that decision, but you should have an entry or mid-range package. And then your entry-level package, usually you're using what's called an AIO, an all-in-one, or in the old days, they called it a cleaner wax. So it cleans, meaning it removes swirls and scratches, it polishes, makes the paint look glossy, and leaves some sort of protection on it. So you can do that in 1 step. So you'd wash and clay the car, go over it with, in our case, it'd be the Z1, which is a ceramic AIO, and then you're done. It's one and done. And but anyway, those videos I was sharing, I was trying to explain these 3 approaches. And of course, if you're an enthusiast, look, I know a lot of guys that got something really cool in the garage, and then they got their daily driver in the wife's car. You might not want to do a multiple step to your daily drivers. 1 step's plenty good. It's just going to be sitting outside getting exposed to the elements more. But that thing in the garage, whether it's a new Corvette, a new Lexus, maybe that's the one that, once a year you want to go out there and really bring that finish up. So you have the multiple steps. So if you're an enthusiast, the same mindset applies. But if you're doing this for business, you need to have different packages. You need to explain to the customer that, the more they spend, the more work you do, the better and better the results you're going to get, and let them at that point decide how much they want to spend. So, but those are the 3 packages. And then of course, for this class coming up this next Saturday, June 8th, for June 8th class, we're going to go over those 3 different approaches using the 3 different cars. The Camaro is the worst car out of the 3. And first thing, Saturday morning, I'm going to turn the class loose with wool pads on rotary polishers to attack that paint. It is that bad. And that's the first tool nowadays I always let my class use, is a rotary polisher. We start with what most people would consider the most difficult tool to use, and then we build on that foundation. And of course, I walk around the entire time and show people and guide people, make sure that, they're comfortable with the tool and they're using it correctly and no mistakes are being made. I don't just grab a chair, sit back and watch. I'm pretty hands-on in these classes. But we'll start out with the Camaro doing a multiple step approach. And then we'll move on to the Hudson and do a 1-step approach. And then for the 36 over there, we're just going to use Z1 on it. And that way the students see in practice the 3 applications or the 3 approaches that will tackle, most people's expectations, most people's cars and their budget. So that's how that works. Anyway, that is how I would handle the hard to reach areas. And again, of course, I could put a 1-inch pan on a Rupes long neck and come in here and lightly hit all that stuff. But I mean, just stand back here. Let me wipe the rest of this off. Just stand back and look at that. It looks fine. It looks fine. And most of my customers are not going to go, Mike, this really looks good, but when I get right up here, that doesn't look perfect yet. No one's going to do that, okay? Anyway, thank you for watching. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like it, share it with your friends. And the next time I have something unique, interesting, or cool in the garage, probably be doing this again. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.